The Democrats still don't have an identity, and they're trying to, I guess, put out back calls for people that are in the podcast space. They're trying to find their next Joe Rogan.
I am the Joe Rogan of the left.
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 I'm the Joe Rogan of the left.
I am 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 the Joe Rogan of the left.
Hey Kayla, are you the Joe Rogan of the left?
We went to the Spearmint Rhino Strip Club at 9:30 a.m. on a Thursday. Yeah. And it was packed! That's what was really depressing. That's one of those dumb Red Bull and vodka moments.
Joe Rogan is an American comedian. He got his start as the host of Fear Factor, an early 2000s reality competition show where people would eat bugs for money. Rogan is now one of the most popular podcast hosts in the world, and this didn't happen overnight, nor is it the insidious political project that certain people make it out to be. Over the years, Rogan has had anyone and everyone on his show, from politicians like Bernie Sanders to bloodthirsty apartheid-loving tech moguls like Elon Musk. It didn't start out as a place for people to get their politics and news of the day, but over time it became that way. And after the election of Donald Trump for the second time, many started clamoring for the left's answer to the rightward media shift that seems to be captivating young people, young men in particular. Trump's strategy of appealing to the Theo Vaughns and Aiden Rosses of the world seems to be a successful one, and Rogan, of course, is the most popular of them all. And the Democrats seem to be trying to catch up by actively pouring millions of dollars into what they claim to be their response to all of this: the Joe Rogan of the left. So yes, we are talking about the mythical quest for the Joe Rogan on the left. We're talking about what politicians generally get wrong about internet culture, and to tackle this complex topic, I have brought along two friends with me. One of them is a longtime friend of the show, Kat Tenbarge. She has been on the channel before. She is a fantastic internet culture journalist. And our second guest is Caroline Kwan, a Twitch streamer and political commentator, one of my favorite Twitch streamers out there, and both of their information and their social channels are in the description down below, so please go check them out. And thank you so much again to Kat and Caroline for being on the show today. So this era is more or less defined by the 2016 election, where we're waving in the rearview window to Obama-era optimism, and the Democratic Party is ignoring Trump as an actual threat and going all in on establishment candidate Hillary Clinton. Clinton was, of course, rivaled by Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders, an independent Democratic socialist running on the Democratic ticket with a resonant message of economic populism and the belief that the lives of the middle class were being destroyed at the hands of the 1%. People really resonated with this message, especially young people in many different factions across the internet. The Bernie bros, the dirtbag left. But the problem was that the Democratic establishment, who had just had 8 years of success with Obama, did not want to move any farther left as the GOP continued to swing further right. And so the Bernie bros were alienated. They were told that they were sexist, that they didn't like that it was a woman's turn, and that there would ultimately be no place in the party for them. And not just them, but anyone who had a radical view of what America could be beyond everything is fine, we just had a black president. Bernie was then rat-fucked, he lost the 2016 nomination, but his message remained, becoming even more popular in 2020 until he was rat-fucked, he lost a second time, but guess who endorsed Bernie in 2020?
Insanely consistent his entire life. He's basically been saying the same thing, been for the same thing his whole life. And that, in and of itself, is a very powerful structure to operate from.
Who are you going to vote for in the primary?
I think I'll probably vote for Bernie.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, this is not to say that coveting a Joe Rogan endorsement is objectively a good thing all the way through. At this point, he had espoused dangerous misinformation on his show, and he platformed some dangerous people and ideas. But that doesn't change the fact that a lot of people were influenced by him nonetheless. I remember distinctly when he was like, I am super into Bernie. And all these Democratic consultant people freaked out and they were like, oh my God, that's such a bad indictment on Bernie Sanders. But then it's like, okay, you're kind of alienating, I guess, the people who were like resonating with that like Bernie Sanders, Bernie bro energy. Where do you think they're gonna go? And now it's so interesting to me that all of a sudden we have to go win those people back.
Yes, and it's such a great point because it's like they had no love for Joe Rogan or wanting to recreate his success when this kind of ecosystem was in favor of Bernie Sanders. The Democratic establishment did not want Bernie Sanders to be the nominee for president. They took steps to ensure that it would be Hillary Clinton instead. And that party infrastructure, which is still the same people, the same principles, the same methodology, it's like very little has evolved. And so you cannot create the special sauce that made Joe Rogan out of thin air. And what they don't understand about him is that it's not just that he is pro-Trump or that he is conservative, it is that he is anti-establishment. Because I think one of the things about Joe Rogan too is that he's not really an intellectual guy. He is like a sponge for whoever is in front of him, whatever his guest is saying. And he brings on all of these people who spread conspiracy theories and spread disinformation and are increasingly alt-right. So, 9 years ago, Joe Rogan could have espoused like Bernie Sanders rhetoric in response, but over the years, you've watched him get radicalized and have these increasingly radical guests come on. And through that, Joe Rogan gets radicalized, the people watching the Joe Rogan Experience get radicalized, and the country as a whole, it's not the one force pushing us in that direction, but it's more so like a mirror being held up to like what is happening within the country, within the population that is increasingly voting conservative.
There's a couple problems with how the Democrats approach this kind of stuff. Or I guess there's one reason, but there's multiple layers to it. All of the purity-tested, tried-and-true blue Democrats are already aligned with you and voting for you, so who does that leave? Leftists and conservatives, and Democrats do not want to play dirty with either of those groups, but these people are often more ideologically complex than you give them credit for. They probably agree with you on some points and could potentially be swayed to your side if you at least engage in somewhat good faith by showing up in the media spaces that they're already in. But Chuck Schumer and Cory Booker are not going to show up on Theo Von or Joe Rogan because they think it's beneath them. Meanwhile, the Republicans are just treating it as what it is, entertainment, which makes sense because Trump has always been an entertainer. It doesn't matter if the channel is aligned with your views 100% of the time, as long as you are engaging with it for the sake of its intended use, views and money. And the messaging comes along with that.
And so I'm not saying anyone else needs to say anything, but I think I'm just that more isn't said about it by me. So I just, I want to be able to speak up about that I think we're watching probably like, one of the sickest things that's ever happened.
I think Theo's a good example because to me, he really does represent your average American. Of course, he's reacting the way he does to the news of thousands of murdered children in Gaza because he's reacting in real time. Even though I don't agree with everything he has said, he is authentic. If you were trying to force a Joe Rogan of the left, young people are sniffing that a mile away. Mm-hmm. It's not authentic. It's not organic. And it's just not going to work.
And it's sad because in reality, what I think a lot of these ultra successful creators are doing is they are just reflecting where the culture is at the moment. Like a lot of these podcasters are very good at what they do because they know what people want and they just reflect that back at them. I think a lot of times their views are not so much driven by what is the most logical or the best idea. It's more so driven by like, what do I know will help me succeed on these internet platforms? And so this sort of like democratic misunderstanding of Joe Rogan exists on multiple levels because I don't think they understand why Joe Rogan is successful. I don't think they understand why Joe Rogan has become more conservative over the years. And I also don't think they really know like how to be successful on social media and why it's become harder for progressives to succeed on social media. Because I'm like, you cannot just get out there and flood YouTube with a bunch of like pro-democratic establishment content and expect it to perform well. The YouTube algorithm and the YouTube environment has now like incentivized this type of conservative content. That's why people keep making it and why it continues to be so successful.
So not only are the Democrats fundamentally misunderstanding the whole point and appeal of Joe Rogan and his content, but they're also trying to funnel money into this miscellaneous, nebulous Joe Rogan of the left equivalent without acknowledging the fact that there are already Twitch streamers and YouTubers and influencers who have primarily left-leaning audiences, but there are a couple reasons why the Democrats don't really want to pay them any attention. So let's talk about that.
Now to this developing story that may be related to the Trump immigration policy. Popular left-wing Twitch streamer and YouTuber Hasan Piker says he was detained at a U.S. airport for hours this weekend and questioned by U.S. Customs and Border Protection about his political beliefs, specifically on Gaza and President Trump.
I find it really strange that they consider asking questions that are very specific about my political commentary in general, as it pertains to Israel-Palestine, but also specifically around my loyalty to the current administration and Donald Trump.
Hasan Piker is probably the most well-known popular left-wing influencer and personality. Recently, Hasan has gotten a lot more mainstream attention with some features from places like NBC News and the New York Times, some even eager to ascribe this Joe Rogan of the left moniker to him. Hasan is also controversial. He breaks people's brains, he makes people angry, characteristics that the Democrats would probably deem unsafe for their brand. But again, that's where the people are, so why are they ignoring him? If you want to find your own Joe Rogan of the left, at least I would think, if I was a consultant being paid God knows what by McKinsey to figure this problem out, I would start with the one leftist streamer that most people know and identify with, controversial or not, and figure out, at the very least, if you're not going to get behind him, Hasan Piker,
yes.
I'll try to understand, like, what appeals to people about him, right? Like, it just feels like they are not even acknowledging that that is a thing that they should even try to understand, let alone, like, approach directly.
They kicked him out of the DNC, which is so emblematic of why their approach toward online content has not done well. You also look at the steps that the Democratic Party tried to take in the run-up to the 2024 election, where they were bringing in, like, TikTokers into the White House. They were trying to, like, spread out their talking points among these TikTokers. But again, like, there's a failure to understand the content landscape. They can't get behind someone like Hasan because he's too far to the left of the current Democratic establishment. And the Republican establishment, there was resistance, especially in the early days of Donald Trump's political career, where you had more of this tension between, like, classic Republican ideas and MAGA conservatism. But over time, the entire right-wing party apparatus allowed itself to be pulled to the right to meet Donald Trump's supporters where they were. And on the left, you have this utter resistance to meet people in the Democratic Party where they are. So on issues like Palestine, the Democratic Party does not want to get behind someone like Hasan because he is so passionately pro-Palestine and the Democratic establishment is not. And so that unwillingness, and I think that this is within the party more generally, there's an unwillingness to accept that pro-Palestinian sentiment has driven a divisive wedge between the Democratic Party, where, like, younger progressives and people who do consume content online are much more likely to be in favor of Palestinian rights and in favor of a free Palestine. And so they're not willing to actually meet people to the left of where they are in the way that the Republican Party was willing to swing right to enable the success of Trump and to kind of, like, enable all of their success.
So it's really that individualism too, where for the Democrats, like, you put someone out there, you're paying an influencer now, them advocating for the Democratic Party is not gonna fly. It's why, like, Joe Rogan and all these guys call themselves free thinkers. They really emphasize themselves as individuals. They don't say that they're on the right. They don't say that they're on the left. They are free thinkers. They are, individuals who are not beholden to an institution or a party or any, concentrated group that is in power. And that's very appealing.
And this is not just an issue of why won't the Democrats put their support behind Hasan Piker, because that's kind of how it's being treated in traditional media spaces right now, because he's probably the only leftist content creator that they know of. But the reality is that there are a lot of creators on all kinds of platforms that have these, left-leaning audiences that are not being tapped into because they're not being perceived as creators who talk about all politics all the time, no matter what. And Caroline and I had a great conversation about this because we're two commentators who talk primarily about pop culture, but there's an underlying political sense to everything that we do because a lot of people don't understand how those things are connected, and that's how we get people to watch us and understand our ideas. People may be coming to us for the latest on celebrity gossip, but they're staying for some of the more complex ideas that we're putting forward. It's not always about what kind of political views you're espousing directly to your audience. A lot of times they are looking for something else. They're looking for conversations about culture, and then they stay for the politics or they get sucked into the politics. The way that young boys are looking for other young men who play video games, and then all of a sudden they all have a pretty concerning view about women.
A lot of people on the left dismiss the type of work that I and other leftist commentators do because they look down on pop culture. They're like, this isn't serious. They don't have the understanding still that a lot of public values and political narratives are being shaped and disseminated within the space of entertainment and celebrity news and just pop culture largely. And you look at a lot of the most popular podcasters and content creators who maybe they voted for Trump, maybe they didn't, but they're still in kind of the manosphere realm. And a lot of what they do is just talk about everyday stuff. They talk about, movies, they talk about working out.
And I especially also think this happens with women too, where like people look down on us and what we do and what we cover, when it's like a lot of the times, at least, I don't know about you, but I'm deliberately always trying to be like, okay, I'm talking about this thing, this pop culture story and situation, but what I'm really trying to do is make you think about like other things and how these topics relate to like bigger problems in the world surrounding media literacy and social media and etc. And I think that's like an underrated skill that like I don't think the Democratic Party currently possesses, because also on the other side of it, if you ask like these kids who watch a Theo Von or Asmongold or whoever, they're like, oh, I like somebody telling stories about getting high, or I like watching people play video games.
Libs still look at engaging in discourse that is political, but is through the lens of popular culture. They look at that as frivolous.
So we've talked a little bit about who the Democrats are not funding, but let's talk about who they do seem to be paying attention to.
But we will only be heard if we vote. As the saying goes, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. And I spend a lot of time with
young men.
I love young men. Olivia Julianna is an influencer from Texas who has worked on a number of political campaigns and is also known to be pretty close to the previous Biden administration in terms of being one of the influencers that has actively campaigned for him and seems to be in this realm of, state-sanctioned influencers that the Democrats like. The problem is that she is very annoying and off-putting to both leftists and conservatives. And for some reason, as all of these reports are flying around about how the Democrats are trying to win back, charismatic influencers and get more people in their corner, we don't know what that plan actually looks like, but she seems to be everywhere and not shutting up. Like, she was recently on some call about how the Democrats need to win back young men. And I'd like to hope that this is not the direction that they're going in. Maybe there is some kind of calculated plan behind the scenes that the Democrats are working on with this strategy. But again, she is all that we are currently seeing. And the last time I saw a video of her, she was yelling at people for being mean to Joe Biden about his cancer diagnosis. Which again, does not exactly scream Joe Rogan of the left. Also, I want to be clear because I have to and people are shitty, this is not an excuse to make fun of Olivia Julianna's looks or appearance. There are plenty of other things to be critical about her for, and they're probably the same things that you are critical about the Democratic Party over. But it remains to be seen what the Democrats' plan actually is here. I guess we just have to hope that it does not involve her. The truth is that there is no mythical Joe Rogan. There is no left-friendly, Democrat-friendly Joe Rogan. who is coming to save us. The Democrats have to learn how to work within the channels that currently exist and meet people where they are at. And until they learn how to do that, maybe, just maybe, the real Joe Rogan of the left is the friends that we've made along the way. Thank you so much for watching, you guys. Thanks again to Caroline and Kat for starring in this video along with me. Their information is in the description down below. See you next time. Bye.